Imagine living in a world where money rained from the skies. A place where every second person was becoming rich overnight from the stock market. The 1920s in America were a golden dream just like this, an era known as the Roaring Twenties. The streets of New York shimmered with gleaming cars, high fashion, and the rhythmic pulse of jazz music, a frenzy that swept everyone along. People were staking their entire lives, their savings, their homes, and their lands on stocks because they believed this market could never fall. But then, one morning arrived that turned this dream into a nightmare. October 24, 1929, the day history remembers as Black Thursday. In mere hours, billions of dollars vanished from the lofty halls of Wall Street. Those who were enjoying breakfast in their lavish homes were on the sidewalks by noon. This was not just an economic collapse, it was the end of an era of hubris. The day when money itself seemed to die. Welcome to Wealth History Files. Today, we will turn the pages of one of history's darkest chapters, the Great Depression. We will not simply see by what percentage the market fell, but we will understand how human greed alone brought a civilization to the brink of starvation and ruin. Was it all mere coincidence, or was it a paper empire destined to crumble? Let us turn back the wheels of time and peer into the soul of this great calamity. To understand the crash, we must first understand the madness that preceded it. The First World War had ended, and America emerged as a victor. This was an era when technology began reshaping everyday life. Radios, automobiles, and electrically powered machines were becoming common. Yet beneath this prosperity, a poisonous seed was being sown: debt. For the first time in history, people were taught that they could purchase things without having the money to pay for them. The slogan, "Buy now, pay later," echoed across the nation. People were indulging in luxury on installments, buying furniture, cars, and even clothes on credit. But before the stock market took off, there was the Florida real estate bubble. In the mid-1920s, people were buying swamps in Florida, believing they would become the next gold mine. Prices tripled in months, and people bought land they had never even seen. When that bubble burst in 1926, it was a warning sign. But the world didn't listen. Instead, they took that speculative energy and poured it directly into Wall Street. The most dangerous game was being played in the stock market through margin trading. Banks encouraged people by telling them that even if they didn't have $100, they could pay just $10, and the bank would lend them the remaining $90. People believed that if the market rose by just 10%, they would double their money instantly. This was a bubble, artificially inflated by borrowed wealth. Shoemakers, street vendors, and barbers, all were caught in this gambling den. Even the great Winston Churchill, visiting New York at the time, was caught up in the excitement, though he later witnessed the carnage firsthand. There were men who saw it coming, but they were ignored. One such man was Jesse Livermore, a legendary speculator. While the world was buying, Livermore began shorting the market, betting that it would fall. On the day of the crash, while his friends were losing their fortunes and their lives, Livermore made over $100 million in a single day. He became the most hated man in America, a symbol of the cold reality of finance. For one person to win this big, millions of others must lose everything. By mid-1929, the first alarms of danger had begun to ring. Factories had produced so much inventory that there was no one left to buy it. Warehouses were full, but the common man's pockets were empty because his entire income was going toward paying off debt installments. The agricultural sector was already in despair, farmers watched their crops rot in the fields because prices had dropped so low that harvesting them cost more than they were worth. Yet, the magicians of Wall Street kept their blinders on, claiming that prosperity would never end. The foundations of the economy were hollow, yet the facade above remained shiny. It was a sandcastle economy, ready to collapse with the smallest push. In September 1929, the market trembled for the first time, but experts dismissed it as a minor correction. Then came that fateful morning, October 24th. As soon as the opening bell rang at Wall Street, a wave of selling erupted. Within the first hour, millions of shares were dumped, but there were no buyers. Prices fell like stones dropped from a cliff. People ran toward Wall Street buildings like madmen, and the New York police had to be called to control the desperate crowds. News traveled via telegraph to small towns where people gathered in shock, watching their life savings vanish in minutes. On October 29th, Black Tuesday, what little remained was obliterated. 16 million shares were sold in a single day at throwaway prices. The market had crumbled into a pile of rubble. After the collapse, the real suffering began. Banks began to fail one by one. When people rushed to withdraw their lifetime savings, they discovered a bitter truth: the banks had used their money to gamble on the stock market or lent it to others who were now bankrupt. Over 9,000 banks closed their doors forever. Millions of people lost their children's education funds, their retirement savings, and their dignity in a single stroke. Then came the Dust Bowl. As if the economic collapse wasn't enough, a massive drought hit the Great Plains of America. Winds picked up the dry soil, creating black blizzards that buried farms and suffocated livestock. Thousands of families, known as Okies, packed their meager belongings into broken-down cars and fled toward California, looking for work that didn't exist. This was a double tragedy: a broken economy and a broken earth. Unemployment soared to 25%. Men who once wore suits to high-rise offices now stood in endless lines for a bowl of soup, wearing signs around their necks that read, "I am willing to do any work." Across America, shantytowns made of cardboard and scrap metal sprang up, known as Hoovervilles. In a cruel irony, wheat piles were burned in the countryside because there was no money to transport them, while in the cities, children starved in the shadows. Humanity was enduring its harshest financial test. This was not merely a loss of money, it was a collapse of trust. Faith in the economic system vanished. Suicide rates skyrocketed. A famous joke at New York hotels was that when someone booked a room, the receptionist would ask, "For sleeping or for jumping?" Men left their homes in shame, unable to face their families. Women took on labor they never imagined to keep their households running. This psychological trauma left marks for decades, leading an entire generation to hide money under mattresses rather than trusting a bank ever again. The crisis of 1929 lasted until 1939, spreading like a plague across the globe. It destroyed Germany's already fragile economy, leading to hyperinflation where people needed a wheelbarrow full of money just to buy a loaf of bread. Historians argue that this desperation fueled the rise of Adolf Hitler and the onset of World War II. When stomachs are empty and hope is gone, people are easily drawn to extremist ideas and strongmen who promise easy solutions. A century later, we find ourselves at a similar crossroads. Global economies still run on mountains of debt, higher than ever before in history. Stock markets and digital assets continue to promise overnight fortunes through complex algorithms and social media hype. Have we truly learned from history, or are we merely awaiting the next Black Thursday? The tools have changed, but human psychology, the swing between extreme greed and paralyzing fear, remains exactly the same. Remember, history does not repeat itself exactly, but it often rhymes. Economics is not merely a game of numbers, it is the sum of human lives, decisions, and emotions. It is a fragile web of trust that, once broken, takes a generation to heal. The tale of 1929 reminds us that when greed overtakes reason, nature eventually balances the account. Tell us in the comments, do you think today's financial system is another sandcastle waiting for a push? Are we living in a new, roaring 20s, before the next great fall? If you found this historical analysis insightful, like this video and subscribe to our channel, Wealth History Files, to explore more such cautionary chapters from history. We bring you the stories that the banks and markets want you to forget. Thank you for watching. Farewell.